A man opens a mysterious book of ancient knowledge, overwhelmed by its content, unable to believe what he's holding. A massive creature, the Death Trent, towers over them, destroying everything in its path. A brave group of heroes faces the monster head-on. Magnus, the party's magician, casts a fire spell, but quickly realizes it has no effect on the beast. He tells warrior Eugene about the problem, and Eugene, frustrated, listens. Magnus wants to try a different spell, but Eugene dismisses him, saying it's useless against a plant-type monster. Magnus insists the creature might be different, but Eugene orders him to stick to the plan. Suddenly, a branch of the monster strikes Eugene. Magnus quickly casts another fire spell, but it fails again, and Eugene is hit, leaving Magnus furious. Seeing Eugene gravely injured, Nunhilda offers to heal him with her magic, filling him with life-giving light. Eugene recovers and arrogantly comments that Hilda is more reliable than Magnus. Hilda smiles and takes his arm, reassuring him that healing is her duty. While they are distracted, the warrior Misha swings her weapon at the tree monster. After landing a powerful blow, she scolds them to stop flirting in the heat of battle. Misha's strike causes the monster to collapse, and the heroes rejoice in their victory. They collect the apples that drop from the monster's defeat as Magnus examines the apple in his hand. He wonders why his fire magic didn't work on the beast. The group travels to the kingdom of Lacusta, stopping at a local tavern. The bar's patrons begin to take notice of them. The group gathers around a table, dividing the apples among them. Apples that enhance strength, agility, and reflexes are given to Misha. After eating one, Misha feels revitalized, her energy surging. Her happiness makes Magnus eager to try one himself. The apples are distributed so each member gets the appropriate boost. Though Magnus hopes for one that will enhance his magic, he's content with Hilda having most of them. However, when only one magic-boosting apple remains, Magnus believes it's rightfully his. To his surprise, Eugene takes it. Magnus protests immediately, questioning the use of strengthening Eugene's magic. Eugene responds that he can use his warrior skills first, and Hilda agrees. Hilda defends Eugene's decision, stating Magnus didn't contribute much to the battle. Magnus can't argue with that, so he falls silent. Misha, however, speaks up, saying Magnus deserves a reward. Feeling frustrated and disappointed, Magnus sulks, missing the magic boost he longed for. He knows that if allowed to use another type of magic, he could have hurt the monster. Eugene voices his disappointment in adding Magnus to the team, calling him a failure. Hilda adds with a smile, saying Magnus's only real contribution was reading the stigmata. Her innocent grin quickly turns mocking, as she says he's useless beyond that. The two continue laughing, mocking Magnus for his inadequacy. Eugene coldly tells the magician they no longer need him and orders him to leave. Magnus, hurt by their words, stands up and walks away from the table. Misha was shocked to see Magnus leave so easily, but he muttered that the group only valued physical strength. She called him a coward as he stood to leave. But Magnus chose to ignore her words. Stepping out into the crowded street, Magnus wandered, lost in thoughts of the past. He remembered the expectations of his homeland, and the faces that had praised him when he first joined the hero group, destined to defeat the Demon King. He knew he carried the weight of all the magicians in his homeland. As the thought of never returning crossed his mind, a voice called out his name. Magnus turned and recognized the man from the tavern. The man apologized for overhearing the hero group's conversation and revealed that he knew Magnus could read the stigmata. To Magnus's surprise, the man handed him a book written in the stigmata. The sight shocked Magnus. As he read through the stigmata, he realized it read, "Everything you need to know to defeat the Demon King Morphi," an encyclopedia written by the gods themselves. Magnus smiled with joy. The man explained that only a few could understand the stigmata, and such a book forged by the gods was an incredibly rare treasure. Magnus asked the price of the book, but the man insisted on giving it to him as a gift. Magnus gave him a few coins in thanks. Back in his room, Magnus eagerly began reading the encyclopedia. As he read, Magnus learned that all monsters in the world carried the Demon King's dark energy and would regenerate after being defeated. He couldn't believe the wealth of knowledge contained in the book. Now, Magnus understood why the monsters they had defeated kept returning. Flipping through more pages, Magnus found something crucial. 3 days later, the 3 Death Trents resurrected. Magnus could hardly believe his eyes. The book detailed how to revive monsters, and it worked exactly as described. The magician smiled, gripped his staff tightly, and prepared to face the monster. He declared that he would defeat it alone. Watching the monster, Magnus was relieved that it hadn't noticed him yet. He cast the first spell, aiming directly at the beast. According to the Encyclopedia, the Death Trent was immune to special spells and weakening charms. However, the book also stated that every monster had a weakness. Magnus cast a hypnotic spell, slowing the monster down, just as the book had instructed. Now he knew that the Death Trent was immune to fire spells, so he shifted his focus to lightning magic. Magnus remembered Eugene's words, telling him to stick to fire magic, and now he smiled, realizing Eugene was wrong. Yet Magnus also saw the error of his past decisions. He felt as if he had been chained by bad choices. But with a resolve to change, he declared he was free from his past. He would gain the power to defeat the Demon King. Clutching his staff, he vowed that the world would know his name, and that the mage class would earn the respect it deserved. Magnus recalled the Encyclopedia's warning that the gods would never intervene, no matter the situation. The book also emphasized that the gods favored those who took their journey into their own hands. These words filled Magnus with motivation, helping him craft a powerful lightning spell. With all his strength, he released a bolt of lightning towards the tree monster. The Death Trent burned and collapsed to the ground, as a shower of apples rained down from the sky. With the monster's defeat, Magnus felt a surge of power coursing through his body. He sensed that his strength had grown immensely, and marveled at how incredible his new book was. A smile spread across his face as he happily held the encyclopedia in his hands. Magnus remembered how he had defeated 8 Death Trents, and now, stronger than ever, he ate a power-enhancing apple, reflecting that he needed a higher-level staff. He dreamed of finding an S-rank weapon, although he knew how rare they were. Lying in bed, Magnus felt hopeless about his situation, but when his gaze landed on the encyclopedia beside him, his face lit up with the realization there was still a way. Magnus quickly crossed the rooftops of the town, stopping at his destination. The massive villa before him made him feel small, like an ant. He walked towards the giant chimney and jumped inside. Magnus descended slowly, his fall controlled by magic, making it effortless and easy. He thought about learning flight magic when he reached level 29. Upon landing, Magnus dusted himself off and took in his surroundings. Walking down the mansion's hallways, he recalled the book's mention of this place being the former residence of the King of Staffs. As he opened the door, he found himself in an office where the king's skeleton lay with his staff beside it. Magnus thought about how the king had once been the strongest magician in Locusta. He carefully wrapped the remains in a bag and then focused on the staff beside him. When Magnus picked it up, he realized it was the legendary S-rank staff of the Supreme, crafted from mithril. He examined the weapon, understanding that it was worth a fortune. Magnus knew that if he sold the staff, he could live like a noble for centuries. Not only was it valuable, but it was also an immensely powerful weapon. He glanced at the encyclopedia, which detailed all the exquisite properties that made this staff so unique and potent. Magnus couldn't help but exclaim how extraordinary the staff was. He then decided to bury the King of Staffs on a hill opposite the villa, next to the king's grave, and asked permission to borrow the staff of the Supreme. Magnus swore to return it after using it to defeat the Demon King Morphi with the help of the encyclopedia. On his long journey, Magnus explored many places, collecting weapons, treasures, and power-ups. Along the way, he saved many lives, including a group of female slaves who thanked him for his help. Magnus felt embarrassed when he realized he was completely immune to their charm. When one of them asked his name, he refused to reveal it, offering only to escort them safely. Magnus reflected that he couldn't let distractions get in the way of his mission. While leading the women to safety, he wondered if he'd ever see them again. Upon returning home, Magnus was amazed at the number of common staffs he had accumulated. In addition, he saw the vast collection of weapons and treasures he owned, and decided he needed to sell the unnecessary items, keeping only what was useful for him. However, Magnus realized he couldn't sell too many at once, as that would raise suspicion. He knew he needed to find the right time and place to sell his collection, and he would use the encyclopedia to find a trustworthy trader. He headed to the Mall Merchants Association, one of the largest organizations for magical weapon trade and manufacturing. Upon arrival, Magnus unexpectedly ran into his old hero party, noticing a new member, a girl from the Cat People, who seemed to have taken his place. Eugene, in particular, seemed displeased to see him. Despite this, Magnus tried to greet them as old friends. Realizing the group wasn't happy to see him, Magnus made to leave, but Misha stopped him, suggesting they could gain valuable information from him. Though Eugene was reluctant, He asked Magnus if he knew where to find a magic staff. Magnus replied that he did, all the while secretly thinking to himself that he actually had more than 10 staffs in his inventory. Eugene was delighted to hear Magnus's response. However, Magnus wondered why the party needed a magic staff now that they no longer had a mage among them. Eugene explained that a noble had requested a magic staff and asked Magnus to reveal the information quickly. Hilda also inquired where they could find such a staff. Magnus, thinking quickly, offered a plant he could sell to them. Eugene grinned, excited, saying that Magnus was finally proving useful. Hilda knelt down and offered 1,200 VND to purchase the staff. Magnus doubted they truly had that kind of money. Hilda reassured him, saying the church could provide the funds. Magnus, knowing the church's reputation for extracting vast sums from the poor in the name of their god, Tygon, felt no guilt in accepting the money. He told himself he could take the money without hesitation. Magnus agreed to Hilda's offer, making her beam with happiness. Seeing her innocent expression, Magnus suspected that beneath her calm facade, she was secretly angry and humiliated. He wondered why they were so desperate to obtain the staff. After the exchange, Magnus took the bag of money and handed over the staff. Eugene laughed heartily, revealing that the noble who requested the staff offered a mithril sword in return. The group, except for Misha, laughed at Magnus, commenting that a mithril sword was worth at least 5,000 coins in the market. Eugene eagerly awaited Magnus's reaction. To everyone's surprise, Magnus remained calm and simply praised their luck. The entire group was shocked by his composed response. Deep inside, Magnus had 6 B-rank mithril swords in his possession, along with his A-rank lightning sword, so he couldn't care less about their trade with the noble. Magnus said his goodbyes and left, leaving Eugene puzzled. Before he could go, Misha asked if Magnus truly wouldn't return to the group. Magnus responded, asking why he should, and Misha fell silent. Seeing her quiet reaction, Magnus thought she looked like a child throwing a tantrum, a side of her he had never seen before. Inside the Mall Merchants Association, Magnus continued searching for a stall to sell his weapons. He suddenly spotted the slave girl he had saved, now working at one of the booths. She approached him, overwhelmed with emotion, and asked if he could go on a date with her, gazing at him intently. Magnus was shocked by her boldness. He quickly pulled her out of the building, leading her to a secluded alley to avoid prying eyes. Magnus told the girl not to say such things in public, but she explained she couldn't control her emotions. Realizing the situation was getting complicated, Magnus knew he needed to stop her from revealing anything about him. When the girl asked if she was bothering him, Magnus answered no, then asked if she worked in the building. The girl revealed she was the daughter of a large merchant corporation, introducing herself as Arya and expressing her desire to repay Magnus for saving her life. Seeing her confusion and the tears in her eyes, Magnus wondered if she was truly serious. He reminded himself that, as a magician, he needed to be cautious. Seeing his silence, Arya asked if he really didn't like her presence, or if he wanted something else from her. She shared the horrifying story of her kidnapping and her life as a slave. She remembered the day Magnus saved her and the others, and realized that no one could compare to him. Magnus looked at Arya, unable to deny that he was somewhat interested in her. But bound by his oath to defeat the Demon King, he had no choice but to turn her down. Confused, Magnus told Arya that he had no experience with women, which caused him to panic as he tried to focus on his mission to destroy the Demon King. But his words unintentionally veered in another direction. Arya, equally confused, admitted that she had no experience with men either, and reassured him that she didn't mind his inexperience. Magnus, realizing she had no issue with him, agreed, which made Arya smile with happiness. She didn't mind that this was their first time together and was ready to give it her all, especially since she was with the person who had saved her life, making Magnus blush. Magnus formally introduced himself, and Arya immediately recognized his name as the magician from the hero group. She expressed her opinion that the heroes had been foolish to kick him out, but Magnus didn't care anymore, as it was part of his past. Both blushed when discussing when they should go on a date. Upon returning home, Magnus was confident that Arya would not reveal any information about the items he had taken from the robber. He also reflected on the potential advantages of befriending her. As Magnus lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about what it would be like to enter a relationship for the first time. On the appointed day, he arrived at the location on time, even though the book advised arriving earlier. He imagined how elegant he would appear when he met Arya. When he arrived, Arya was already there, explaining that she had come early because she was so excited about their date. An innocent comment that made Magnus find her adorable. Magnus mentioned that he had found a great restaurant for them to try, which made Arya happy. As they walked together, Magnus wondered if Arya would let him hold her hand, and just then she took the initiative, holding his hand. Magnus felt an unexpected happiness as they walked hand in hand, while Arya smiled, clearly enjoying their time together and eager to keep moving. Magnus blushed, thinking to himself that girls were amazing. Upon arriving at the restaurant, Arya was excited because she really liked pancakes. Magnus said he had passed by the place many times and wanted her to try it. The food was served and it looked delicious. Both of them happily enjoyed their meals. While Magnus thought about the knowledge he had gained from the Encyclopedia, appreciating how this place made great cakes, though it wasn't widely known. He enjoyed his omelet, which he thought enhanced the flavor of the meal. Meanwhile, Arya was immersed in happiness, munching on her pancakes, and commented that the combination of sauce and toppings made the pancakes soft and delicious. They both enjoyed the meal so much that they decided to try each other's dishes. Arya was so pleased with the meal that Magnus thought all his efforts in finding the perfect spot had been worth it. She grabbed his arm and asked where they should go next. Magnus felt confused when he noticed her breast brushing against his arm, but they continued to enjoy the day, from shopping to dinner. When night fell, they walked down the street together, with Arya commenting that she had a wonderful time and wanted to repay Magnus somehow. She asked him to promise they would go out again. Magnus was caught off guard when Arya leaned in for a romantic kiss, and their lips touched. Magnus's cheeks turned red, his eyes filled with hope. Arya then asked if this was his first kiss, before suddenly running away in embarrassment. Magnus, still in shock from his first kiss, walked away, dazed. Holding the encyclopedia, he realized that the date's success was thanks to the book's guidance. He remembered that the book had a chapter on important people, including a detailed article about Arya. Thanks to the information, Magnus was able to pick the best places to take her, and Arya's happy smile was imprinted on his mind. Magnus felt the book's value more than ever. As he flipped through the encyclopedia, Magnus wondered what his next step should be. Suddenly, he was surprised to find a side quest recorded in the book, involving a girl he had once saved with the hero group. This girl was Mel, a 14-year-old from the village of Enzo, who had been bedridden due to a strange illness ever since he had first met her. Hilda's magic was powerless against Mel's illness. The book stated that the only way to cure it was to defeat the beast that had caused the curse. Magnus gripped his staff with determination and set out for Enzo village. In Enzo, Magnus spoke with the village chief, who was puzzled by the young man's declaration to defeat the beast near their village. Magnus explained that he had left the hero group, but the village chief still saw him as a powerful magician. Upon hearing that Magnus intended to stay in the village chief kindly invited him into his home. Tragedy struck when the chief's family succumbed to an epidemic, leaving him alone. Regarding the illness, Magnus got straight to the point, speculating that it was linked to Mel, the chief's niece, and that slaying the beast might cure her. The village chief was so shocked by Magnus's words that he stood up in disbelief. Though Magnus wasn't certain about his theory, he was resolute in his mission to destroy the beast and left immediately afterward. He didn't want the kind chief or his poor niece to feel overly indebted. And Magnus was determined to avoid such awkwardness as he prepared to hunt the beast. As he left the village, he was met by a crowd of villagers, all hoping he would succeed in saving Mel. Seeing the chief's embarrassed expression, Magnus realized it was he who had spread the rumor of his mission. With the pressure of everyone's hopes on him, Magnus felt uneasy about leaving. While walking through the forest, he sensed someone following him. When he confronted the stalker, a man in heavy armor with a scarred face and stern expression appeared. Upon closer inspection, Magnus recognized him as Glans, from Enzo village. Glans knelt before Magnus, his face alight with joy at being recognized, and Magnus was relieved to recall him from the crowd. Glans asked to join Magnus on his quest to destroy the beast, looking at him earnestly. Magnus studied the man carefully, noticing he was experienced in combat. He asked why Glans wanted to join him. Blushing, Glans revealed it was to save Mel, his childhood friend, just 4 years younger than him, meaning Glans was only 18, a fact that surprised Magnus, who had assumed they were closer in age. Glans confessed his love for Mel, and when Magnus asked if he would tell her, Glans admitted it was too difficult. He lacked the confidence, especially with her illness and her statue-like appearance. Glans simply hoped he was strong enough to protect her, explaining that he had fought in the army to become a village guard. Concerned for Mel's illness, Glans couldn't sit idly by when he learned of Magnus's plan to face the beast, despite the danger. He assured Magnus that he was willing to sacrifice himself if necessary. Glans believed his years of swordsmanship practice had all been leading to this moment. Magnus couldn't refuse Glans's plea. He understood the young man's feelings and saw that they would make a good team in battle, especially with Magnus's magical prowess as the vanguard. After everything was settled, Magnus began discussing their possible battle strategies. Through analysis, Magnus realized that Glans was only at level 7 to 9, while their enemy was a level 19 monster. He began to think of ways to balance the odds. Suddenly, a mighty roar echoed through the air, and both men braced themselves. They saw the massive beast approaching, so enormous that it blotted out the sun. In that moment, Magnus cast numerous enhancement spells on himself and Glans. Though Glans knew the magic would empower him, he was still astonished by the surge of strength coursing through his body. He felt incredibly honored to receive such power from the great magician Magnus. With his fire-enchanted sword, Glans charged directly toward the beast. Magnus thought to himself that no ordinary person would dare face such a colossal monster head-on without the magical boost he had given Glans, magic so potent it rivaled that of a priest. Combined with Glans's fierce resolve, he became a formidable warrior. Rushing forward without hesitation, Glans struck with a powerful slash, remarking that thanks to Magnus's magic, the fight had become easier than ever. The monster attempted a counterattack, but Glans dodged effortlessly. Magnus calmly noted that no matter how powerful the beast's strikes were, they were meaningless if the Tatze couldn't land. With another spell, Magnus increased Glans's speed, knowing that the beast was now floundering, unable to hit this agile warrior. Magnus smiled, realizing the monster was trapped. Its attacks futile. Glans recalled Magnus's instructions to avoid every attack at all costs. With each mighty slash, Glans succeeded in wounding the beast. Magnus observed, considering that if he had been alone, he would have used the same strategy, enhancing and dodging to wear the beast down. But with Glans's help, the battle was much shorter. Magnus remembered that the beast had little resistance to fire and immediately cast more spells, ensuring Glans's blows would inflict fatal damage. After completing the incantation, Magnus unleashed a tremendous fire blast at the beast. The fire's power was so intense that it engulfed the monster entirely, leaving it scorched and lifeless. Although Glans felt the heat, he was protected by the magical shield Magnus had cast earlier, ensuring his safety. Magnus felt fortunate that he had given Glans that defense, helping him survive the fierce flames. When the beast lay defeated, Magnus told Glans it was time to return. In Anzo village, the villagers threw a joyous celebration to welcome their heroes home. Though Glans's eyes remained full of determination, the people approached him, angry and concerned over his disappearance to help Magnus. But in the end, everyone was simply relieved and happy to see him return safely. A young girl approached Magnus, eager to touch the famous magician, and soon he was surrounded by other girls, all wanting to do the same. Magnus blushed, wondering if being touched was truly such an extraordinary thing. He noticed even the village children had heard about the battle and were reenacting it, mimicking the earth-shaking roars of the beast. Magnus was surprised to learn that the beast's roar had echoed across the entire village. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out his name. It was Mel, now fully recovered, standing before the village, Ahagtahi, bringing joy and astonishment to all. Glans, too nervous to look at her, was quickly noticed by Magnus. The village chief couldn't hold back his tears when he saw his niece was no longer in danger. She was walking as if nothing had ever happened. Mel wanted to thank Magnus in some way, but he suggested something different. Magnus gently pushed the nervous Glans toward her, encouraging Mel to thank him instead. He explained that it was Glans who had done the most to defeat the beast, acting as his shield and charging headfirst into danger. Magnus insisted, again and again, that Glans had truly become a brave warrior. Despite all the praise, Glans remained too shy to speak in front of Mel. She smiled, amused by the contrast between his fierce fighting and bashful demeanor. Even the villagers agreed with Mel, prompting Glans to finally accept his own contributions. Magnus observed how a warm, content atmosphere spread throughout the village. Suddenly, Mel took Glans' arm, resting her head on his shoulder with a contented smile. She expressed her deep gratitude for his help, leaving Glans even more confused and blushing. Magnus recalled the tense look Glans had when they first met, and seeing him with Mel made him realize that Glans had believed he had no chance. Watching them together, Magnus realized he didn't understand romantic feelings. Thinking of Arya, Magnus suddenly felt the urge to see her as soon as he returned to Locusta. Meanwhile, the village was celebrating with a joyful festival, where children and the elderly were eating, drinking, and many danced. The kind villagers encouraged the introverted Glans to join them in drinking. Magnus became so famous that many young girls invited him to pick drinks. As the party continued, the village chief called Magnus over and declared his wish to repay him for his good deeds. But he was troubled, as the village had little of value to offer. Magnus, however, had no interest in compensation. Uncomfortable with accepting money, he assured the village chief he needed nothing, as he had already received his reward. Magnus explained he had gained valuable spoils from a monster, which the village chief readily accepted. In truth, Magnus had been on a quest and, thanks to an encyclopedia, learned that Forest Beast had a 78% chance of dropping a rare item called the Heart of the Grim Forest. Now, he felt joy as he proudly held the rare item in his hand. The book revealed that if the Heart of the Grim Forest were given to elite dwarven blacksmiths, they could forge it into a unique magical item using their secret techniques. Magnus remembered the moment they defeated the Forest Beast and gazed happily at the sought-after item. He asked Glans if he could keep it, since it was merely a fragment of his shield. Glans had no objection, unaware it was a key crafting ingredient. Glans was puzzled, as anyone could buy shield pieces in Locusta, but Magnus remained excited. By combining the Heart of the Grim Forest with a relic shield, he could create a magical item to defeat the Demon King once and for all. Glans didn't understand Magnus's words, but seeing his steady gaze, he was happy to help. Turning a page in the Encyclopedia, Magnus saw the next step was to meet the mystical dwarf blacksmith Bazurf, who ran a workshop deep in Smith Mountain. Closing the book, Magnus felt sure of what he needed to do. Returning to Locusta, Magnus knocked on the door of a house, asking if it was Bazurf's, but it seemed the blacksmith wasn't home. Magnus, irritated after cutting his date with Arya short to meet Bazurf, was now frustrated that the blacksmith was absent. After repeated knocks, the door finally opened, making Magnus nervous, as dwarves were often difficult. He was shocked to see tools scattered on the floor and Bazurf unconscious. Rushing to the blacksmith, Magnus saw Bazurf's swollen face and wondered what had happened. He hurried to help Bazurf, who was badly injured. The blacksmith claimed the group of heroes had caused his wounds. Hearing this, Magnus couldn't help but feel angry at Eugene for his actions. He offered Bazurf a healing potion to help him recover, but the blacksmith, wary of humans, refused anything for free, especially after the heroes had acted like thieves, taking his belongings while asking for his services. Magnus thought to himself that this was just another example of his group's bad behavior. Seeing the situation, he suggested exchanging the potion for the Thunder Trident, an item Bazurf owned. Magnus was willing to pay 8,000 gold coins, but it would take time to retrieve the money. Surprisingly, Bazurf agreed, and Magnus handed him the potion, introducing himself. The blacksmith thanked him, and after taking the potion, his wounds healed. Bazurf then questioned Magnus's true intentions for visiting the workshop. Magnus suspected it all stemmed from the trident and laughed, explaining he needed Bazurf's skill to craft a magical item for himself. He asked for a discount and offered his last high recovery potion in exchange. The blacksmith chuckled, but requested 2 potions for his work. Magnus joked that his belly gave away everything, and Bazurf remarked that he was once more handsome in his youth. However, Bazurf grew serious and explained he would help, but his prized hammer had been stolen by a group of heroes. He couldn't use any other hammer. It was like needing a compatible magic item. Sadly, he couldn't use another hammer, as it would be like trying to wield a magical item without the proper compatibility. Bazurf explained further that they would need a hammer made from adamantine or mithril to forge high-class items. Magnus quickly flipped through his book, while Bazurf watched with curiosity. "Don't share too much," the wizard cautioned. He then told Bazurf that they could use the Orichalcum Smith hammer. Later, Magnus rode a flying carpet with Arya. With confidence, he reassured the anxious Bazurf that their flying vehicle would get them to the mine in just 2 hours, a trip that would normally take a week. It turned out that Arya's father had given them a quest to collect rare metals from the Grand Mine Megawaras, where the Orichalcum hammer was located. While flying, Bazurf expressed concerns about the undead in the mine. Arya, however, had full faith in Magnus's abilities, and the mage was determined to retrieve the Orichalcum hammer. Their group arrived at the Grand Mine Megawaras. Magnus marveled at the size of the mine, and Bazurf explained that it had once been a rich source of rare materials. Magnus suggested they use the flying carpet to travel within the large mine. Though Bazurf felt uneasy, Magnus reasoned that it would be difficult for Arya to walk, causing the girl to squeal in excitement. Reluctantly, Bazurf joined them on the flying carpet. Soon, they encountered a group of undead deep inside the cave. Bazurf remarked that these creatures were the result of human greed and were doomed to never find peace, calling them pitiful. Magnus pointed out that among the undead were dwarves, to which Bazurf simply referred to them as losers. Magnus raised his staff and began chanting, sending the undead soaring into the sky. Bazurf was impressed by Magnus's powers. While Arya couldn't contain her delight, they continued their ride on the carpet as Magnus battled the undead in the air. The blacksmith couldn't help but praise Magnus's skill. Suddenly, another group of undead appeared, making Arya scream in fear. She pressed herself against Magnus, causing him to blush and feel awkward. Bazurf reminded him to stay focused and not get distracted. Magnus assured him they wouldn't get lost, quietly thanking his book for that. Before the mission, he had memorized the entire map of the mine, remembering all the dangerous paths. Soon they reached the abandoned precious metal mining area in Megawaris, where rich resources still lay. The undead attacked them immediately. Magnus swiftly countered, slicing through skeletons with a single strike. He destroyed them, earning more praise from Arya. After defeating the enemies, Magnus cast another spell, opening a portal to transport workers from Lacusta to Megawaris to begin the resource mining. Bazurf was again amazed at Magnus's magical abilities, calling him a truly powerful wizard. The shaman guided the workers, who eagerly began mining, digging tirelessly to gather as many resources as possible. Magnus watched with satisfaction, planning to wait until the workers were done before transporting the resources back to town and completing the mission. Meanwhile, he led his team to retrieve the orichalcum hammer. After finding the hammer, they returned to the Lacusta Merchant Guild. Malm, the blacksmith, was clearly impressed and bluntly suggested to Magnus that he should marry his daughter. This took the young mage by surprise, leaving him confused. Malm went on, praising Arya's many qualities, all of which were clear to Magnus. He thought to himself that both father and daughter seemed a little reckless, but Arya quickly interrupted, refusing the offer. She didn't want to burden Magnus while he was focused on defeating the Demon King. Malm realized his mistake and immediately apologized, emphasizing the importance of Magnus's mission to defeat the Demon King. Magnus accepted the apology and thanked Arya for sparing him from an awkward situation. Arya smiled warmly, grateful for the chance to meet him. A week later, Magnus visited Bazurf's workshop to collect the item he had requested. Upon entering, Magnus was struck by the magic item made from the relic shield and the heart of the grim forest. He teased Bazurf, saying that it must have taken a lot of effort to create such a magical masterpiece, prompting a sarcastic response from the blacksmith. Magnus approached the item, his excitement building as he looked at the battle golem. Bazurf proudly touched his creation and revealed its name, Gladius, engraved on its armor. With gratitude, Magnus acknowledged the honor of having Bazurf, a skilled warrior, craft such a remarkable golem to help him reach the depths of Megawaris. Bazurf was shocked by this revelation. Together, they climbed aboard the Gladius and began their journey to the mine. Along the way, Magnus playfully asked Bazurf if they could fly a bit, which confused the blacksmith, though he agreed after a moment. Magnus then revealed that he intended to defeat the undead boss, the Bone Dragon, deep within the mine, to stop them from regenerating. Bazurf, however, knew that the Bone Dragon was level 34, far beyond his own level 28, putting Magnus at a disadvantage. This made the battle golem even more crucial, not only for support, but also to test Gladius's abilities, easing Bazurf's worries. Magnus reassured him to relax and trust in his own skills. The two arrived at the Megara mine, and Magnus wasted no time, casting a spell to obliterate the undead guarding the entrance. Magnus tried to convince Bazurf to stay behind, but the determined blacksmith insisted on joining him to face the boss, eager to witness Gladius' strength in battle, no matter the cost. As the battle loomed, Magnus silently weighed the danger of their foe, fearing he might not be able to protect Bazurf if needed. Hearing Magnus's concerns, Bazurf urged him to focus on defeating the boss and not to worry about him. Magnus, impressed, praised Bazurf for being the true mark of an exemplary blacksmith. Deep within the heart of Megara, the two stood facing the giant boss in a tense standoff. Bazurf, stunned by the boss's terrifying appearance, was ordered by Magnus to stay back for his own safety. Suddenly, the boss unleashed a dark miasma, a black mist. According to legend, recruits would suffer greatly from even the slightest touch, and absorbing too much could be fatal. The boss screeched in a haunting cry, summoning waves of undead from the depths of slumber. Magnus swiftly commanded Gladius to protect him, and the golem leaped into action, clearing the undead without hesitation. The plan was unfolding perfectly. With the undead dealt with, Magnus turned his full attention to the boss. He cast a dark spell, hurling it toward the bone dragon, but it had no effect. Berserk panicked, noting that the boss seemed immune to dark magic. Magnus silenced him, telling him to simply watch. Magnus unleashed another spell, this time seeming to land. But the boss responded by emitting a terrifying dark mist, sprouting another head, making it seem invincible. Magnus pressed on with another spell, but once again it did no damage. Berserk grew frustrated. The bone dragon continued to regenerate, growing a third head and launching a vicious attack on Magnus. In response, Magnus fortified his magic, casting defensive spells, and used a Tier A angel ring to withstand the brutal assault. Magnus trembled as a sudden blast of magic hit him, urging himself to end the battle. He chanted the dark spell again. Berserk, growing more frustrated, saw that the spell had no effect, but Magnus told him to pay attention closely. Berserk was stunned to notice that the boss's MP was steadily decreasing. This was because the boss had spent a vast amount of MP summoning undead, regenerating itself, and enduring Magnus's direct attacks. By now, the boss's MP was nearly depleted. To finish the battle, Magnus cast another wave of dark magic, weakening the boss further. The black mist surrounding the boss disappeared. At this point, it could no longer summon undead or regenerate. All it could do was blindly charge at Magnus. Undeterred, Magnus continued using the same spell, completely draining the boss's MP. With one final blow, Magnus destroyed the bone dragon. After the battle, Magnus was rewarded with a power set, enhancing his magical and physical abilities. He leveled up to a level 30 mage. This victory also granted him a rare item, the S-rank Dead Dragon Scepter. Despite his triumph, Magnus realized that as he advanced, the challenges ahead would only grow tougher. After this stage, he would face the level of the legendary masters. Magnus began to think of faster ways to level up, so he consulted his Encyclopedia for guidance. The book revealed that the bone dragon was a newly introduced species, meaning farming them was impossible. Additionally, killing undead soldiers was an insurmountable task, as he would need to slay 10 million of them just to level up. Frustrated, Magnus lay back on his bed, feeling out of options. He considered flying around the city to clear his mind, but ultimately decided against it and opened his book again. Magnus considered tackling side quests for additional rewards. According to the book, the main mission was to defeat the Demon King, while smaller tasks along the way were labeled sub-quests. He saw a list of various side quests, such as exploring Bonavia Cave, fulfilling exploration requests, and exterminating vampires. Inspired by these quests, Magnus rose from his bed, resolved to help those in need and possibly earn rewards in the process. Meanwhile, at the Narcissi mansion, Eugene's frustration reached a boiling point when the head of the mansion rejected the rare flowers they had collected for the request. Narcissus, a scholar, explained that the flowers were no longer needed as they were a month late, and that someone else had gathered them for their experiments. Eugene, furious, argued that Narcissus should pay for the effort it took to retrieve the flowers from the depths of Bonavia Cave. Misha glanced at Eugene, silently noting that they had forgotten about the mission while exploring the cave, and only remembered the flowers at the last moment thanks to Hilda's reminder. Eugene angrily demanded to know who had stolen his mission, and Narcissus revealed that it was a powerful magician named Magnus who had helped them. The warrior seethed with rage, refusing to believe that a mere magician had bested him. Narcissus countered that Magnus was extraordinary, unlike any warrior he had known. Eugene slammed his fist on the table, asserting that he was superior to Magnus in every way. Narcissus dismissed him, pointing out that he had completed the task more slowly than the magician, and that there was no reason for it. Enraged, Eugene threw the flowers to the ground and stomped on them in a fit of madness. Everyone watched in silence as he raged, before Eugene suddenly drew his sword, attempting to intimidate Narcissus. Misha, not intervening, noted that Eugene had become harder to control since Magnus had left. Undeterred, Narcissus stood firm, telling the warrior he would not tolerate such disrespect. As a servant of the 7th generation of Lancaster royalty, and threatened to report him to the king. Eugene, taken aback, immediately changed his attitude. Hilda quickly intervened to calm him down, preventing further damage to their group. The warrior apologized, claiming it was all a joke, though it was clear he was intimidated by Narcis's authority. The scholar smiled coldly, and Eugene awkwardly thanked him for his understanding. Watching the warrior, Misha hoped this encounter had taught him a lesson in controlling his anger. However, this resolve was shattered when Eugene later openly expressed his hatred for Magnus, blaming him for stealing his mission. While the group was on the move, a boy accidentally bumped into Eugene, causing the warrior to lose his temper again and attack the child. The boy was sent flying, and Misha quickly intervened, saving him while scolding Eugene for hurting the child. The boy fainted, and Misha called for Hilda's help. A crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. The warrior was scorned for spreading fear instead of saving the world. They spoke of his reckless past, stealing armor from a weapon shop, leaving unpaid debts, and even skipping meals. His temper was notorious, once striking a child simply for not liking their face. His actions raised doubts about his true motives in helping the needy. They openly compared him to Magnus, who was seen as a far better hero. The crowd continued to cheer the magician, who had healed a wife's incurable wounds using firecrackers. He had also rid a town of vampires. They marveled at how he had destroyed the bone dragon at the Megara mines, a beast that had been invincible for centuries. Even the king was impressed, offering him nobility, but the magician refused, stating his true goal was to defeat the demon king. The villagers agreed that Eugene was unlike Magnus, who seemed more like a hero than he was. Hearing this, Misha felt a strange admiration for Magnus's past deeds, despite his expulsion. Though she had been tough on him, she was glad he had tried to help so many people. Eugene boasted that no magician could surpass him, vowing to prove his superiority to everyone in Locusta. This declaration lit a fire in him, pushing him to take his missions more seriously, becoming in his own way a true warrior. Meanwhile, at Narcissus' mansion, the scholar thanked Magnus for delivering the magic scroll he had needed. Magnus responded that completing the task was an honor, as it helped many people. Narcissus offered future aid if Magnus ever needed it, though Magnus reluctantly accepted. The scholar revealed that the group of heroes had left Locusta to confront General Durbanvoy. Magnus couldn't believe it, knowing that this cursed general, level 40 and one of the 8 evil generals of Morphi, resided on the Death Mountain bordering Locusta. Narcissus confirmed the news, adding that 3 days had passed since the heroes had arrogantly announced their mission to defeat Durbanvoy. Magnus thought Eugene was foolish for challenging Durbanvoy, knowing that the cursed general's special ability, Fistbind, could trap 2 people, unless their level exceeded 32. He worried that the heroes might not be strong enough, unlike himself, who was nearing level 32 due to side quests. This troubled Magnus, and he couldn't bear the thought of the group being destroyed by Durbanvoy. Yet if they survived and kept fighting, perhaps there was something he could do to help. As he pondered, Narcissus watched him with confusion. Initially, Magnus had planned to confront Durbanvoy when he reached level 34, but now, after considering the risks, he had decided to save the group. Before leaving, Magnus apologized to Narcissus, who asked if he was heading to Durbanvoy. Magnus knew his mission seemed absurd, but he couldn't back down. Narcissus laughed at his impulsive heroism, promising a celebration if Magnus succeeded, and offering to host a party. Magnus declined, citing his low alcohol tolerance, surprising Narcissus, who thought it was a waste for such a powerful magician. Magnus added that his resolve for the mission was absolute, even if it sounded ridiculous to Narcissus. Understanding, Narcissus searched for something to aid Magnus on his quest. He then presented a family treasure, a flying carpet, perfect for quickly reaching the heroes. Magnus thanked Narcissus and set off on the carpet with Gladius. Determined to catch up with his old companions and save them, he arrived at Durvanvat's stronghold, a castle standing amidst a dead mountain, and entered without hesitation. Inside, he immediately encountered monsters ranging from level 10 to 13. Magnus realized this mission would be far more difficult than defeating the bone dragon, deciding to clear each area before progressing. As he ventured deeper into the castle, he noticed the hallways were eerily similar, making it feel like a maze. As he moved forward, he encountered a series of traps, making the place even more treacherous. Consulting his book, he searched for a way to detect traps and secret passages using his staff. Magnus attempted to find secret passages, and upon reciting the password, "Glory to Durvanvat," a secret corridor opened. He was thrilled, realizing this would save time on his journey. He chuckled at how trivial the password seemed. His thoughts were abruptly cut off when a level 26 mithril golem appeared before him. With its maximum resistance to magic, it was a nightmare for any magician. Magnus quickly ordered Gladius to strike at the golem, but the creature effortlessly blocked the attack, nearly overpowering Gladius. To support Gladius, Magnus provided him with power boosters to enhance his magical and physical strength. Gladius made another attempt to attack, but the mithril golem retaliated with a powerful blow. Undeterred, Gladius landed a forceful punch, catching the golem off guard. Magnus then summoned an ice spell, freezing the golem in place. He realized that while the golem was resistant to magic, ice could still slow its movements. With the golem fully encased in ice, Gladius launched a devastating strike, shattering the golem down to its core. Magnus couldn't contain his excitement at their victory, especially when the golem turned into valuable mithril ore. Eagerly, he began collecting the ores, imagining the rare items he could acquire by defeating the boss. He pulled out his magic bag, capable of storing vast amounts, and filled it with the ores. After completing the official side quest, he ascended to the 5th floor of the fortress, where he was met with a surprisingly wide hallway. As he moved forward, Magnus accidentally triggered a trap symbol, leading him to encounter Eugene and his team. He congratulated them on finishing the side quest. Eugene, startled, asked why Magnus was there. Magnus explained that he was there to take down Durbanva. Misha chimed in, saying they shared the same goal, and began searching for his team. The magician replied simply that he had no comrades, and fought alone with only the battle golem, Gladius, by his side. Misha, Eugene, and the rest of the group were stunned by Magnus's words, their reactions exactly as Magnus had expected. Without another word, he turned to leave, heading toward the boss. But suddenly, Hilda rushed in, knelt before him, and begged him to rejoin them. She argued that together, they could defeat Durbanva, humanity's greatest enemy, and that he had to fight by their side once more. Eugene seethed with anger at her plea, but Hilda persisted, her determination unwavering. After a long, tense silence, Magnus bluntly rejected her request, surprising everyone with his cold refusal. He told them that working together was pointless, given their past. As he began to walk away, Eugene, boiling with anger, called out to him. Magnus stopped just above the trap symbol, and Eugene mocked him, claiming he didn't even know what he was standing on. The warrior explained that these symbols were scattered across the 5th floor. Magnus pretended not to know, while Eugene continued to rant about the traps and monsters they'd previously encountered. Eugene stepped closer to Magnus, but in a sudden move, he triggered the traps button, sending Magnus tumbling into a pit filled with traps. As Magnus fell, Eugene's laughter echoed down the hallway, taunting him, claiming no magician could ever defeat a hero like him. Magnus landed hard at the bottom of the pit, trapped. He conceded that Eugene might have surpassed him, but then burst into laughter, revealing that he had intended to fall into the pit all along. Just before, Gladius had pressed the traps button, but nothing had happened, leaving him worried about missing out on important loot. Amidst the broken bones, Magnus discovered a crystal ball, an essential magical item needed to defeat Durbanva. He quickly cast a spell, soaring to the top floor and into Durbanva's throne room, leaving Gladius behind. Meanwhile, on the top floor, the cursed general, Durbanvo, greeted the heroes with scorn, praising them for their arrival. Eugene, furious, retorted that he did not need the general's praise, but Durbanvo insisted they did, for they had survived despite being lowly warriors. He was amazed they had made it this far, especially given their low rank and status. To him, their survival seemed like nothing more than luck. Eugene found his words ridiculous, but Durbanvo only laughed. The general then offered Eugene a chance to become his subordinate, promising half of Lacusta as a reward. Eugene's face lit up, but Durbanvo immediately withdrew the offer, mocking him, claiming that someone so weak would die instantly. Furious, Eugene readied himself for battle. He drew his fire sword, preparing for combat with his teammates. He enhanced his physical abilities to the maximum. Misha and the cat warrior charged at Durbanvo, but he effortlessly blocked their strikes. Eugene followed suit, igniting his flaming sword and activating his unique ability, Armen Awakening, revealing the true potential of his weapons and armor. But Durbanvo merely raised his hand, and Eugene's sword shattered with ease, mocked for its poor quality. Eugene stood in shock, unable to comprehend how Lagusta's finest blacksmith's creation could break so easily. Durbanvo mocked him further, asking the name of his sword, claiming that a masterful blacksmith would always engrave it. Eugene was stunned, realizing there was no engraving on his sword. Durbanvod sneered, confirming it was a low-quality weapon, while effortlessly blocking the others' attacks and dealing damage to them. He dismissed their strikes as meaningless, since they lacked magic and were no match for a level 30 boss like him. Misha, assessing the situation, saw how strong he was, noting that he wasn't even injured. Durbanvod taunted them for not having a sorcerer, calling their group unbalanced. Eugene, still absorbed in his failure, said nothing. Insulted, the general shoved him away. Eugene was sent flying across the room, taking heavy damage that left his teammates stunned. Hilda rushed to his side to treat him, but he grabbed her hand, telling her they had to escape, and began pulling her out of the room. Confused, Misha could only watch as they left, calling Eugene a coward. Durbanvod's malicious laugh echoed, questioning whether Eugene was truly a hero or just a fraud. He then turned to the two female warriors, threatening to enjoy himself with them. He extended his enormous hand, revealing mouth-like holes that morphed into slimy tentacles. He claimed he was tired of playing with himself, and now he would use them on them. He reached for Misha, binding her with his tentacles. She pleaded to be released, but the general ignored her, saying she couldn't escape his fistbind because she wasn't at least level 32. Durbanvod lashed out with his tentacles, causing Misha to cry and beg him to stop. Finally, she lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Misha stood frozen in terror. Suddenly, another hand began to touch her, leaving her with no escape. Durbanvod urged her to give up, claiming her resistance was futile. Defeated, Misha closed her eyes, silently begging for someone to save her. She braced herself for the tentacles to return, but they didn't. She slowly opened her eyes and saw Durbanvod looking at someone entering the room. It was then that she realized it was Magnus, with Gladius, his golem warrior. The general immediately sensed that Magnus was a level 32 mage. He quickly offered Magnus the chance to become his subordinate, promising half of Locusta's kingdom in return. Magnus rejected the offer and prepared to strike. Durbanvod smirked, warning that Magnus would soon realize his fear before he would ask again. Magnus mocked him, stating that Durbanvod wasn't scary at all, and that people only feared him due to his empty threats. Durbanvod was impressed by Magnus's courage, and launched a fierce physical attack with his punches. Magnus quickly realized that Durbanvod didn't use fistbind against him because he knew Magnus had reached level 32. Instead, he relied solely on his brute strength. Gladius, Magnus' golem, blocked the punch, shielding him from the powerful blow. Magnus praised his golem, acknowledging that it was truly the work of Bazurf, the greatest blacksmith. He prepared his next move, recalling that he had read that Reuben, one of Durbanvod's weaknesses, was vulnerable to fire. Magnus cast a fire spell, engulfing the general's hand in fierce flames. He assessed the situation, realizing that Reuben was a powerful level 35 monster, but currently at his maximum state. Therefore, using weak magic with a black magic staff would give him an advantage. With this strategy in mind, Magnus was confident of victory. Both Misha and Durbanvod were surprised to see that the magician had managed to defeat Reuben. Durbanvod declared that he was not to be underestimated. Indeed, Magnus pulled out the scepter of the zombie dragon from his magic bag, using it to turn Reuben into an undead and control it. The scepter could revive the dead, but at the cost of a significant amount of MP. Durbanvod showed no reaction to this, remaining unfazed. Magnus, however, was confident he could maintain control over Reuben without depleting his MP. He ordered Reuben to attack, while Durbanvod summoned Reuben Wright to battle. The two monsters clashed evenly, prompting Magnus to enhance Reuben Left's strength. He cast an ice spell on Reuben Wright, knowing that ice was his weakness. The ice froze the arm completely, and eventually, undead Reuben shattered it into pieces. Magnus quickly turned Reuben Wright into an undead, and used both monster hands to attack Durbanvod. The two arms began to assault the general, putting him at a disadvantage. He couldn't believe a human was capable of dealing him damage. Taking advantage of this, Magnus cast lightning magic, targeting the boss's weak point. He hurled the lightning towards Durbanvod, but the general managed to fend it off, repelling the magic. Magnus was impressed by Durbanvod's resilience, recognizing his true power. Meanwhile, Misha was shocked to see both sides fighting with equal strength. Despite taking damage from the lightning spell, Durbanvod survived and laughed, taunting Magnus. He then claimed Magnus was wasting his time, insisting he could never be defeated. This made the other warriors fear that the general might be immortal. Durbanvod revealed that he had removed and shattered his own heart, explaining that as long as it still beat, he would remain forever immortal. Magnus remained unfazed, confusing the general. Magnus then pulled a crystal from his magic bag and showed it to him. D'Urbanvaux was horrified to see his own heart in Magnus's hands. He begged Magnus not to destroy it, but Magnus was determined to end the battle with overwhelming force. He smashed the crystal on the floor, and it shattered into pieces. The collapse of D'Urbanvaux was inevitable, causing it to fall apart completely. The last commander-in-chief disbanded his forces. Magnus let out a sigh of relief. 2 female warriors approached him, their faces filled with gratitude for his bravery in saving them from the evil general. Magnus stared at the ruined city of D'Urbanvaux, swearing that this was not the end for him. Knowing the danger wasn't over, Magnus agreed, but decided to lead the 2 warriors away from the wreckage. After the victorious battle, Magnus returned to Locusta, seeking refuge at Narses' home. He was clearly exhausted, and Narses, noticing this, asked why such a hero was so tired. Magnus explained that the townspeople constantly gathered to thank him, and he had to attend a victory ceremony soon. On top of that, Narses kept making him drink more than necessary. Narses chuckled, saying life in Locusta had become much more exciting ever since Magnus began defeating monsters, and everyone was grateful. Magnus felt embarrassed. He insisted he just wanted to walk through town like the old days. Narses laughed again. 5 days later, Locusta Castle was filled with people celebrating the hero's return. In the grand banquet hall, Magnus expressed his gratitude to Arya for handling the guests. She gracefully bowed to the guests, thanking them for their kind words about Magnus defeating D'Urbanvaux. He was impressed by how effortlessly she managed it. Arya mingled with the crowd, pulling Magnus close and telling him to be proud of what he'd accomplished. They exchanged smiles. Magnus then drank a potion, but Arya noticed his face had gone pale. Concerned, she asked him to lie on her lap, but he quickly spat out the medicine. Politely, he refused, not wanting to ruin her beautiful dress. Arya was thrilled by his compliment. Just then, Misha appeared and approached Magnus, but Arya swiftly intervened, claiming that he was not feeling well. Misha protested, saying this was exactly why she couldn't leave him. The 2 women engaged in a quiet standoff, asserting their positions. Misha asked Arya her name, and Arya introduced herself. The warrior then realized that Arya was a former teammate of Magnus. Arya hinted that Misha had also treated Magnus poorly in the past. Misha deeply regretted it. But the merchant's daughter remained skeptical. She turned to Magnus, admitting that their team's survival had depended on him, and apologized for her past mistreatment. Arya immediately cut in, suggesting that Magnus didn't need to forgive her. The tension escalated when Arya revealed she was Magnus's girlfriend, sparking a tug-of-war between the 2 women. He stepped in, announcing that he had already forgiven Misha. Arya remarked on how forgiving he was, but Magnus explained that Misha had only been a victim of Eugene's abuse, so he held no grudge. Arya gave in, noting that Magnus was the type to be easily taken advantage of. She promised, as the daughter of Locusta's most powerful merchant, to always watch over and protect him. Touched by her dedication, Magnus thanked her for always being by his side.